You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You might say that the theme of today's program is silence and the breaking of it. My first guests, while glad of the attention now garnered, though it's still too little, over the killings of African-American men by police, wondered about the invisibility of African-American women who died by the same means. Hence the Say Her Name movement, which is what we'll talk about today. My other guest has written a book about the hitherto all but invisible convention of women that preceded Seneca Falls, with a lot of the attendees overlapping both gatherings. All that and more coming up, but first we need to go inside the headlines. The Me Too movement is sweeping the globe. In South Korea, rising political star and presidential hopeful An Hee-jung, governor of South Gyeongsang Province, announced his resignation and retirement from public life in a Facebook post after one of his secretaries claimed in public that he had raped her 4 times since last June. This follows on Lee Yun-tak, former artistic director of the National Theatre of Korea, having to resign and apologize after being accused by actress Kim Sun of sexual assault. Whether it's a highly respected as being incorruptible prosecutor or a South Korean poet often cited as a Nobel Literature Prize candidate, South Korea's boys have been biting the dust after accusations from women strengthened by Me Too. And back in Norristown, Pennsylvania, Bill Cosby's attorneys are claiming on the one hand that Me Too has nothing to do with Cosby's trial, based on accusations by more than 50 women claiming he had drugged and sexually assaulted them, but on the other hand claiming that the Me Too climate hinders Cosby from ever getting a fair trial. Earlier on in the previous trial, his attorney had pushed for postponement after postponement, I guess hoping that it would all go away after enough delays, and hoping perhaps that Cosby, who is elderly, might age and die peacefully without ever going to trial. Well, that delaying strategy didn't count on the interruption of Me Too consciousness. Even the nuns are getting cranky. The March issue of Women Church World, the monthly magazine distributed alongside the Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano, carried an article quoting numerous nuns using pseudonyms in an exposé about their being exploited by leaders and institutions of the church. One said, "Nuns are seen as volunteers available on call, which gives rise to abuse of power." Another noted that many nuns did not have registered contracts with the bishops, schools, parishes, or congregations for which they work, so they're paid little or not at all. And they work long hours to cook and clean for cardinals and bishops without ever being asked, ever, to eat at the same table. The article came about after discussions with nuns, says Lucetta Scarafia, the editor of the magazine. The nuns say it isn't only a question of money, but a larger one, that while male vocations are valued, the work of women is not. Familiar? The Pope is supposedly sympathetic, reportedly having lovingly blamed the victims when he said, "Women must have the courage to say no if asked for something that is more servitude than service." Well, the nuns are having, I might say, none of it. "Now," says one, "when I'm invited to hold a conference, I no longer hesitate to say that I want to be paid and how much I expect." A lower caste Hindu woman has been elected to the Pakistan Senate, a first in the Muslim-majority nation where religious minorities suffer considerable discrimination and abuse. Krishna Kumari, age 39, is a human rights activist and a member of the Pakistan People's Party. She is also a Dalit, that is, a member of the formerly so-called untouchables caste, and she worked as a bonded laborer after her peasant family childhood. She was married off as a teenager, and she somehow completed her education and got a master's degree and became a campaigner for women's rights. We send her the heartiest possible congratulations. Back home, Ben Carson, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, he of the slow speech and sleepy eyes, has changed the mission statement of his agency, removing anti-discrimination wording and also removing promises of discrimination-free communities. The teachers' strike in West Virginia, which started on February 22nd, finally came to an end when the strikers, over 80% women, didn't settle for the governor's vague promise and insisted instead on the legislature voting in a bill for a 5% pay raise to all state employees. Only then did they stop striking, but by then it was already happily contagious, with teachers in Oklahoma and other states beginning to organize to do precisely the same thing. It is pure madness that the people in whom this country places the care and challenge of educating its children get paid at or below the level of janitors and parking car attendants. More about the teachers later in this program. And in closing, the man currently masquerading as President of the United States is being sued, as you may have heard, by a former porn actor, Stormy Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Gregory Clifford, and who, despite having signed a non-disclosure agreement, has fought back against his and his lawyers' now repeated attempt to silence her, because she says she was inspired by the Me Too movement. Besides, her lawsuit claims, it turned out that Trump, who is, as we know, the founder of the gang that couldn't shoot straight, never signed the agreement to begin with. You cannot make this kind of stuff up. It's time for a short break. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. Do you know the name Corinne Gaines? No, I thought probably not. Not many people do, all the more tragedy. But after hearing the next segment, I think you'll never forget the name, Corinne Gaines. That's coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Kimberle Williams Crenshaw, Kim Crenshaw for short, is an American civil rights advocate and a leading scholar of critical race theory. She's a full-time professor at the UCLA School of Law and at Columbia Law School, where she specializes in race and gender issues. She is known for the introduction and development of intersectional theory, the study of how overlapping or intersecting social identities, particularly minority identities, relate to systems and structures of oppression, domination, or discrimination. Intersectional feminism examines the overlapping systems of oppression and discrimination that women are subject to due to their ethnicity, sexuality, and economic background. One of the projects of the African American Policy Forum, of which Kim is a founder, is Say Her Name, Resisting Police Brutality Against Black Women. And we're going to be discussing that today because we're also joined, to my great pleasure, by Rhanda Dormeus, who is the mother of Corinne Gaines, who was killed by police. And Rhanda has become a major voice in the mothers of Say Her Name. So we're talking with both of them today, and it's my great pleasure to have them on Women's Media Center Live. Kimberle Crenshaw and Rhanda Dormeus. Kim Crenshaw and Rhanda Dormeus, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Kim, why don't you start giving some basic background on African American Policy Forum?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the African American Policy Forum is now celebrating its 21st year. It is a think tank and social justice advocacy organization that was founded by Luke Harris and myself in the aftermath of so many events happening in the 90s, the confirmation of Clarence Thomas, the Million Man March, the pushback on affirmative action. All of these were moments where the lack of a structural account of inequality and the lack of intersectionality seemed to rear its ugly head. So we decided to create an organization that would allow us to bring issues that are intersectional issues to the forefront of advocacy, of research. And we've been doing that work for 2 decades. Most recently, we've been focusing on African American women who've been killed by the police, trying to integrate gender into the battle against anti-racist police violence. We've been looking at Black Girls Matter. We have a report that deals with Black girls being pushed out of school. And finally, Why We Can't Wait. It has been an advocacy campaign to include women and girls in all racial justice programs, particularly those that came from President Obama, through My Brother's Keeper, and other foundation work that does not include women and girls in racial justice research and advocacy.
Right. And Say Her Name, Resisting Police Brutality Against Black Women is an incredible report that people should go to the website and download and get. It is stunning. Also, Kim is too modest to say so, but I will say so because I'm a word person, and it was she who created and installed in the English language the word and the political concepts of intersectionality, which now have spread across the globe. And today we're honored to have with us Rhanda Dormeus, who is the mother of Corinne Gaines. And, well, why don't you two tell the story?
Yeah, Rhanda is one of the mothers of Say Her Name. We uncovered many stories about Black women who've been killed by the police, but her daughter's story was actually one of the few that got some degree of coverage in the media, partly due to the circumstances. We reached out to Rhanda as to provide support, and she's become one of the most vocal and centered leaders of Say Her Name. So I'll let her tell, of course, the story about what happened.
Thanks, Robin. Well, again, Kimberle and the AAPF reached out to myself and a few other mothers in 2016, the latter part of 2016. August 1st of 2016, my 23-year-old daughter, Corinne Gaines, was gunned down by Baltimore County Police Officer Corporal Royce Ruby. And my grandson was also injured in this assault. He was actually shot twice. Just recently, we just settled, well, not settled, but we just finalized a jury case in a civil matter for my daughter and my grandson and Corinne's estate. I don't know, what can I say? This has been a crazy battle that the AAPF has definitely helped me get through. And they brought me into a circle of mothers that have had the same experience. It's just not by death, but by being gunned down by law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so, this organization has put me in a situation where I can reach out to other mothers who have the exact same experience. Losing a child is losing a child. I don't care what age and how, whatever. But the similarities in our cases is what bonds us.
Mm-hmm, of
because,
course.
It was a struggle. Up until recently, for me, it was a struggle. I mean, it's still a struggle, but, fortunately in my case, the jury found this officer guilty. There are a lot of mothers out here that are not blessed to even have gotten that far.
Yes, yeah. I was thinking about this the other day when, there's been all this furor, and thank God that there's been this furor over guns because of the Parkland, Florida high school shooting. But I couldn't help noticing that I didn't see one African American. I saw one Asian American, but it seems to me that the high school is largely European American. And the NRA and the right wing are so eager to put guns in, everybody's hands. They don't want to cut it off at age 21. They want to keep it at 18. They'd have guns in the hands of, toddlers if they could sell guns. And yet, I couldn't help thinking of Tamir Rice, who was I think he was 12 years old, the kid in Cleveland who was shot dead for carrying a toy pistol by cops. There's an irony about all this, about it. It depends on who they want to have guns, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I've even made, comments to, just in general that look how quickly these children were able to get access to the White House, to express their concerns. Now, fortunately, there has not been a lot of, I don't even think any real mass shootings in African-American communities, but it lies that, the more privileged have their needs met when I won't say have their needs met, but they have access to the people who could make things happen for them, whereas the African-American community are not as privileged.
Right, yeah.
And especially with respect to even possession of firearms. So, all of this clamoring now to say, well, let's arm the teachers. A few people, not a few, a lot of people point out, well, what happens when black people when they legally possess weapons? Think about Philando Castile, who legally possessed a weapon and was killed for it. Right. Corinne legally possessed a weapon and was killed for it. So we realize that the question here is one that has everything to do with the threat that is perceived when black people are armed. Yeah. And what's amazing about it is you would think that if the NRA, let's even say you support them, you would think that if they're really concerned about making sure that gun owners are able to own guns without being afraid of being killed by the police, they would have been all over the Corinne King's case. They would have been all over Philando Castile, and they're completely silent when it's black people who are losing their lives.
No, and always when they say, well, it all depends on who's carrying the gun. Guns don't kill people. The people who carry the gun kill. And so it takes, what is the mantra of all it takes to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But the assumption there is that the bad guy is black and the good guy is white. And the assumption.
And the important thing about Say Her Name is that most of that assumption assumes that the bad guy is a bad guy, that he's a guy, not a woman. And that's why we're trying to raise awareness to the fact that everything that we think we know about police violence, namely, it happens when they see a black body and they feel threatened. They think that they're looking at a criminal. They think that they have to use overwhelming force to protect themselves. That doesn't just happen with men. It happens with women as well.
Yes. And then it gets totally disappeared.
And that's the additional dimension, I think, of the trauma that so many of our mothers are facing. As Rhonda just pointed out, losing a child is terrible no matter what the circumstance. Yes. Losing a child to state-sanctioned violence, basically those who are supposed to take care of us are taking our lives. But then the third element is that lost life seems to be irrelevant as far as the media is concerned, as far as many of the advocates are concerned. They literally do not know the names of the women who've lost their lives.
I know.
Which is why we call this Say Her Name.
Say Her Name, yes. Take a minute and just tell me, how is Cody doing, Rhonda? That's Corinne's child, who also was shot up.
Well, I don't have the access that I would like to have with him because his dad is his guardian, so he spends the majority of time with his paternal family. But I have had interaction with him over the trial, and I must say he is not the same child that he was.
Of course not.
Even if listening...
Of course not. He's traumatized. God help him.
Right, and even listening to his psychiatrist testify, I don't remember the name of this pyramid, but he stated that Cody was at the top of the pyramid as far as post-traumatic stress. Yeah. Which makes him like 15 or 20 times more likely to commit suicide and a whole bunch of other things. But the thing is that he's the top of the spectrum. So everything under it, he's at risk for. And the doctor did state he's going to need help for the rest of his life.
Yes.
He has night terrors and he's become aggressive and he's just not the same child.
How old is he now?
He's 6. He'll be 7, May 17th.
Oh, poor baby, God. That is the thing also with women. That is the thing that they're, unlike men, women, there's a higher likelihood that ancillary, attached lives will be affected as well. Children, families. I mean, because the woman is the tent pole of the family or of raising the kids. It's always going to be clustering around the woman, not around the men. Men get up and go, but the woman stays.
And, Robin, this is one of the reasons why it's so important for the mothers to have the opportunity to talk among themselves, to be part of the community, because these consequences of women being killed by the police, many, if not most of them, mothers, create enormous consequences, particularly for their children, because the grandmothers, the grandparents are often not the guardians, even though they may have a closer relationship with the kids than some of the fathers. Is not the case in all cases, but custody is a question that so many of the families have to deal with. In addition to treatment for the children, dealing with lifelong trauma, these are all consequences that are enormously, important. They require treatment and resources, and that's where they're the fewest resources.
Yes. Talk about the programs that you're going to be doing, Kim, about this at the end of March, and also what people can do.
Yes. Well, we have for the last 4 years, Robin, dedicated a week coming after the end of Black History Month, the end of Women's History Month, the last week of March. We've dedicated to the social economic status of African American women. We've done this in honor of the fact that we're in the decade of the Afro-descendant as declared by the UN, and our concern was that many times those kind of frameworks disregard the issues having to do with women who are Afro-descendants. So we're doing this along with the decade, and it's called Her Dream Deferred. Each day we have a program that deals with an aspect of African women and their socioeconomic status. So that's coming up in March 26th to March 30th. We're really, really excited about our programs. Wednesday, March 28th, we're going to have an event called Recovering Harriet, and we're going to be looking at building resistance through arts and activism. And at the African American Museum on Thursday, we're going to have an event called Harriet's Daughters, looking at what the contemporary dimension of her struggle is. And throughout the week, we're going to be dealing with sexual harassment in African American women, birth control to death, the regulation of Black women's reproductive well-being. Will end the week on Friday. So we really hope people join us. Tuesday, we're releasing a big report on social justice, SOS. So there are plenty of opportunities to join in. Folks can go to our website at www.aapf.org. That's aapf.org for African American Policy Forum.
That was a great summary and filled with energy and hope. Oh, thanks, Kim, old buddy. You continue doing stunning work. And thank you, Rhanda, for surviving and for turning all the grief and the horror into action, because it's,
much.
That's the way, if there is ever healing, that's the way to it. Thank you both for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks for having us, Robin.
Thank you, Robin.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Iceland may become the first European country to ban male circumcision. A bill introduced in February by 4 political parties uses the same wording as a 2005 Icelandic law banning female genital mutilation, changing the word girls to children. It would become a crime punishable by up to 6 years imprisonment to circumcise infant boys for non-medical reasons. Well, of course, quickly, organizations representing both Muslims and Jews united and became mobilized against the potential ban, claiming it would be against their religious traditions and therefore against religion. In an act of anti-foreskin solidarity, the Roman Catholic Church in the European Union has also objected, claiming that such legislation would be an attack on all religious freedom. Silsa Gunnarsdottir of the centrist Progressive Party cited the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in defense of the potential law and added, "We should never cause a child unnecessary harm, no matter what the intentions are." Yes. Doctors and nurses broadly support the bill. I, of course, think it's surreal that there even has to be such a bill, but good for Icelanders, men, and other living things. Guangzhou, China, is one of China's largest cities, and it has the world's fourth busiest metro system after Shanghai, Beijing, and London. Well, last year a group of young feminists there raised more than $6,000 from the public for an advertising campaign to raise awareness about rampant sexual harassment on public transportation. But the authorities blocked the ad campaign, saying it would cause panic to the public, and instead proposed instituting women-only subway cars. The feminists thought that was stupid and it was ghettoizing of women, and they called for the enforcement of laws against sexual harassment instead. The government bans gender discrimination but doesn't define what it is, and those who actually complain risk getting punished themselves. Still, this year the cars were presented to the public, painted with flowers and with pink signs designating women only in Chinese characters. Now the problem is that men are flooding into the cars. One woman passenger who was quoted in the New York Times article about this subject said, quote, "Men are totally clueless. They really are uncivilized." Close quote. Back home, the glamorous $5 billion headquarters of Apple, called Apple Park, built for more than 13,000 employees, was planned as a glass-encased architectural masterpiece. But in January, as office workers began moving in after 5 years of construction, people began walking into glass panes. It's unclear how many got hurt, but the San Francisco Chronicle found at least 3 incidents in a quick review obtained from Santa Clara County. People suffered head injuries, possible concussions, and one man hit his head so hard against the glass that he bled from his eyebrows and was expected to need stitches. Apple had been forewarned about this as a possible problem. And let me remind you that when you're having a computer problem, Apple is the company that sends you to their Genius Bar. Well, we have survived another Oscar night, which celebrated diversity among the audience and the presenters and still celebrated mostly pale males among the winners. The women who did speak, however, were refreshingly mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. You go, Frances McDormand. But if that gave you a headache and you need an aspirin and a stiff drink for the real story. The Women's Media Center report, The Status of Women of Color in the U.S. News Media 2018, is now out and available for free from womensmediacenter.com. It's a rare look at where women journalists of color are and are not in legacy, print, radio, TV, and digital news, too. It extends and builds on data previously published in the Women's Media Center's annual The Status of Women in U.S. Media study. This new report comes at a time when the nation's population is changing rapidly. The U.S. Census projects that, their terminology, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, and those who are multiracial will be the majority of the U.S. population by 2050. Nevertheless, media are lagging far behind. Women of color represent just 7.95% of U.S. print newsroom staff, 12.6% of local TV news staff, and 6.2% of local radio staff. This is an important must-read report, so download it, read it, and weep, and then go do something about it. This just in and awesome. For the first time ever, a Belgian criminal court has convicted a man of sexism in the public space. The man was convicted of sexism, slander, and threatening a police officer, and was fined €3,000 or US dollars 3,725. Failure to pay the fine could land him in prison. He had crossed the street against a red light and then ran when approached by a female police officer. When she gave chase and caught him, she asked why he'd run after a minor infraction, And then he screamed at her, "Shut your mouth. I don't talk to women. Being a police officer is not a job for women." Well, the officer arrested him and filed charges. The sexism law was passed in 2014 as an amendment to an earlier law condemning discrimination in general. Committing sexism in the public space. What a great law. My God, it describes the planet Earth. Time for another quick pause. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live. Did you ever hear of a convention of women in the 19th century, all wearing hoop skirts and little bonnets of the time, dressed very demurely but with souls on fire and hearts of steel, dedicated to a great cause? And did you know that that took place before Seneca Falls? Well, coming right up is a book about precisely that, in the hidden history of the women's movement. So don't you move. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. My next guest, Helen LaKelly Hunt, is an activist, an author, a friend, and one of the women who keeps the contemporary women's movement going and alive. She co-founded the Dallas Women's Foundation, the New York Women's Foundation, and the Women's Funding Network. She's the author of Faith and Feminism, A Holy Alliance, and I'll get to it in a minute, the book she's here to talk about today. She also helped to catalyze, together with her sister, Ambassador Swanee Hunt, Women Moving Millions, a global network of donors that have made unprecedented gifts of $1 million or more for the advancement of women and girls. Helen was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2001. She holds a Ph.D. from Union Theological Seminary, as well as 3 degrees from Southern Methodist University. She and her husband, Harville, have done a number of books together, and they live in Dallas, Texas. And today she's going to talk with us about her new book, just recently out with the Feminist Press, called And the Spirit Moved Them, The Lost Radical History of the First Feminists. And here is Helen LaKelly Hunt. Helen, old friend, dear friend, welcome to the program.
Oh, so glad to be here, Robin.
Well, we go back a ways, and you of course, as I mentioned in the introduction, you have been the Jane Appleseed of the women who have helped to seed the women's funding movement for the feminist movement, and been amazing there. But you also are an author of a number of books that I've mentioned, and the new one is just recently out. It is called And the Spirit Moved Them, The Lost Radical History of America's First Feminists, and it's published by the Feminist Press, fittingly enough. Talk to us about how you came to write this book, because the personal aspect of this book and you is, I think, very moving, particularly to me who know you, but to anybody, I think it's a very touching and important history.
Okay, well, the origin really starts back with my story of not really knowing anything about money. My first husband represented me at the oil company and got into trouble and had to leave the country. And it was a wake-up call. I need to learn about money, and so did enter feminism when I was in awe of the Miss Foundation Australia. I saw women's philanthropy, women's financial institutions being built that would help women learn about money. So I worked for, I'm not quite sure how long, trying to foster a few of these women's funds in different parts of the country. And I didn't know anything about feminism. Like I had not read your work. I hadn't had time. And your work is so awesome, Robin. And I was sort of tired, so I took out time to get a doctorate. And I said, I'm going to study feminism, and I'm curious about are there any, I think the religious roots of American feminism, and I was really hoping to maybe look at Seneca Falls and elicit those, too, as I studied the origin of American feminism. And I accidentally found a women's convention, a whole document about this women's convention in the early 1800s, and I thought it was Seneca Falls. And lo and behold, it was a foundation of a meeting of American women to talk about lifting their voices up in the culture about something they disagreed with. And I had seen the Ken Burns documentary on Elizabeth and Susan, mm-hmm. and that Seneca Falls was the first convention of American women. And this was an earlier one. I said, mm-hmm. No, wait just a minute. And so when I read it, I was so inspired by these women who some scholars have written a little bit about, but not much. And we call them the abolitionist feminists. These were the women 13 years before Seneca Falls convened women from colonies all around in their little hoop skirts or their Quaker drape dresses. They got on stage coaches or got on boats and came to New York City in 1837. And they convened a convention that was anti-slavery. Mm-hmm. But they their first motion at the convention was that women have the right to move out of the domestic sphere and into, quote, the sphere which God had planned for her, which was speaking out to the public as well. So they claimed their voice for women in the country for the first time in American history.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I think one of the confusions that came about between the two conventions is that earlier one called itself the Women's Anti-Slavery Convention, and Seneca Falls called itself a Women's Rights Convention. So that I think that certainly helped to create the confusion. But obviously, many women overlapped between the two. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Feminism was so associated, and anti-slavery was so associated with the secular, that for a long time, up to and during the Civil War, abolitionist and infidel were used almost synonymously. So that makes what these, of course, the Grimke sisters, as we know from the great Gerda Lerner biography, were very different. There were devout women involved. But how do you answer those who point to the secular history of feminism and the many, many quotes by Stanton, by Anthony, even by Child about the religion, and organized religion in particular, being the major stumbling block for women's rights?
Oh, I agree.
I know you do. But my listenership doesn't know that, so I want to bring that out.
Yeah. So the church was one of the biggest foes of the rise of the women's rights movement. And, they just slapped women down when they wanted to speak out.
They also made excuses for slavery, the church. The Bible was used for slavery.
Of course, yeah. The church condoned slavery. Many of them condoned slavery.
Yeah.
Said it was in the scriptures that slaves were okay,
right,
and that women should not speak out. Now, there were some, like the Quakers church was very different, and there were a few other churches that did hold a vision. But basically, what I would say was what these women said, which was, quote, the government says I don't have the right to speak.
Mm-hmm.
My church says I do not have the right to speak out.
Right.
But God is telling me I have to speak out, and I'm willing to die for this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to give my life to speak out. I can no longer be mute. So there are the Sojourner truths. But these women, and Sojourner is known about as a faith-based woman who's telling her truth and will talk down to any guy. No one can tell these women what to do, but it's just that their stories got lost to history. Mm-hmm. And it was such an honor, along with the feminist press, to bring the stories of these women out of the shadows and now into the public in a more visible way.
Yeah, and they went on to try. I mean, they like Lydia Maria Child. I think, didn't she found the Unitarians church, or she was one of the founders? I mean, she tried her lifelong. She was certainly a spiritual person, but she tried to separate her, whatever we could call it, her awe of the universe from organized religion and theology and doctrine. Whereas Elizabeth Cady Stanton sort of said "feh" on that and wrote the Women's Bible and took a more oppositional stance. But there's I mean, I don't think we have to settle for either or. I'm always a both and person. And I think what's important,
right,
what's important about this book is that it brings that out. I think if everyone were to read, And the Spirit Moved Them, along with a book that I have many times frequently talked about on the program, which is called Women Without Superstition, No Gods, No Masters. It's the collected writings of women free thinkers of the suffrage movement and the 20th century by Annie Laurie Gaylor. What you get is a rounded picture of secular feminists and faith-based feminists who, while not coming from the same place, we're going in the same direction, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And I think what's so touching about this book is not only your scholarship, which is certainly thorough and highly impressive, but also there is a personal thread in this, which is your own thread as an individual feminist activist. It gives it an inner and outer that I think is very dimensionally important.
I just want this book to echo what's happening around the women's marches and women speaking out.
Right.
Like, we cannot crumble under Trump. Like, and you know who's the model for that? These abolitionist feminists. Mm-hmm. Like, they were, like, it's like they really were willing to die for their cause.
Right.
And I think it was Linda Hirschman that synchronistically, like 2 months after the book came out, she had a article in the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. The title was, "To Resist a Trump Presidency, Ask, what would the abolitionists do?"
Right.
And she and I have gotten together, and she is so wowed that this lost history that really very few people have known about is now coming to light.
Yes.
These women made it to New York. Wow. It was so radical what they did. And Lucretia Mott was the chair. Now, see, the vice chair was African American. Mm-hmm. And the next year, another one, and part Indian. And they really had a commitment to organize with, not for. These women were committed to have all races come together for the Anti-Slavery Convention of American Women in 1837. They were so effective. They were so powerful. I probably don't have time to tell you what their organizing strategy was, but it was a very relational organizing strategy, going door to door, petitioning, blah, blah, blah. Mm. So many women in the Northeast didn't even know slavery existed in the South. So it was a beautiful organizing. They met the next year in Philadelphia, same women, same agenda. And after they started meeting, a crowd surrounded the building, threw rocks and sticks through the windows, crashing the windows, yelling and shouting. The women couldn't hear each other. So Lucretia, who was convening, said, let's link black and white women together. Let's link arm in arm. Let's open the door and walk out into the mob. They did that. They walked out into the mob. And then the mob burnt the building down. It was Pennsylvania Hall. And so there was such outrage. The newspaper articles, what are these women doing? They're going to undo the country. They're supposed to be at home, rocking the cradle. Right. And so they were defying so many of the cultural mores at that time. So, y'all, it's going to be easy to defy Trump. It's not. Well,
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about the easy part, but the defying part, I'm absolutely positive about. We're doing it. We have done it, and we will do it, and eventually we'll pull it off. We will. Helen, thank you for this book. It's called "And the Spirit Moved Them." The Lost Radical History of America's First Feminists. The author, and we've been speaking with her, is my old friend Helen LaKelly Hunt, published by the Feminist Press. Thank you, and thank you for being with us at Women's Media Center Live, dear Helen.
A great honor to do so.
And we need to take one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with those fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. So I was thinking about silence and the breaking of it. And I was noticing how commentators discuss the Florida high school student activists with a bit of patronizing surprise as being so articulate. And I was thinking about the shock with which West Virginian politicians reacted to the teachers' strike. And I was thinking about how, 10 seconds after Me Too got started, there were already folks saying it had gone too far, was too cacophonous, would turn people off, was too loud and strident. When teachers first unionized in Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, 97% were women, and they were paid about the same as housemaids. Today, on average, their pay has vastly improved. It's now about equal to that of parking car lot attendants. 2 years ago, the Washington Post ran a piece about West Virginia titled "How the Birthplace of American Labor Just Turned on Its Unions." It was a piece about how, following the Republican takeover of the state legislature in 2014, the state passed a so-called right-to-work law prohibiting mandatory union dues. The state also repealed the law mandating that workers on public construction projects be paid prevailing industry rates. Strikes by teachers are actually unlawful in West Virginia, and their unions lack collective bargaining rights, which is why it was all the more startling and wondrous that the teachers and some other school employees in all of West Virginia's 55 counties struck until lawmakers passed a 5% raise and a commitment to addressing rapidly rising health insurance premiums. Since statewide teacher strikes are extremely rare anywhere, people were astounded, although West Virginia teachers' pay ranked 48th in the nation. How could the teachers be rebelling? And teachers in Oklahoma, maybe as well. I didn't see any coverage noting that over 80% of teachers in this country are female. 80% also happens to be the number of female members of Indivisible.org. You know, those amazing plain folks, ordinary citizens who've been attending town hall meetings, demonstrating outside their local congresspeople's offices, and sitting in outside Mitch McConnell's lavish Senate suite and that of House Speaker Ryan. No one has done a gender head count of the high school students in Florida and, for that matter, across the country, students who are tired of getting killed and are demonstrating for sane gun policies, but just from the visuals it seems encouragingly half male, half female, and certainly that's true for their spokespeople. There is unarguably a breath of something different in the air, a spirit of rebellion. Some say it began with the non-election of Trump, but that was actually followed by days of stunned depression across the country. You know when it actually began? I don't think I'm wearing a so-called feminist lens when I notice the fact that this grassroots activist energy began with the Women's March. I don't think it's coincidental that women are leading Indivisible.org, that women are leading the teacher strikes, that nuns are demanding respect, that young women are an equal presence in the leaderless national activism of high school kids, and, for that matter, that well before the Women's March, Women created Black Lives Matter, and women created the Say Her Name movement. Just as repression is contagious, look at the wave of authoritarianism sweeping the world. So is the rebellious insistence on freedom. We catch fire from each other. It's what I've called the "you too" moment in feminism. It's the human hand, 4 breakable fingers and 1 breakable opposable thumb that are stronger in one fist. It's knowing you're not alone and you're not crazy. You can break all the ceilings imaginable, brick, glass, celluloid, whatever, but none of that can happen until you break the silence. And then you have to keep saying it, and saying it, and saying it, and writing it, and screaming it, and whispering it, and drawing it, and memeing it, and dancing it, and singing it, and signing it, and shouting it, over and over until you almost despair, and some do. You get a lot of practice, but they finally have to hear. And that's when they're surprised that you're so articulate, which means they simply haven't been listening. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.